The chronometer on Dr. Aris Thorne's wrist ticked with a maddening regularity, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy swirling within the obsidian walls of his hidden laboratory. It was 3:17 a.m., August 14, 1948. Again, for the 72nd time according to his meticulously kept records. Outside the perpetual drizzle of Neo-London, a city perpetually shrouded in smog and powered by volatile Ethereum reactors, fell on the cobblestone streets, gas lamps. He was trapped in a loop, a repeating cycle of 3 days, doomed to relive the same events until he could figure out how to break free and to clear his name. He was framed for the murder of Professor Eldridge, his mentor, the man who had introduced him to the tantalizing possibilities of manipulating time. The evidence, meticulously fabricated, pointed squarely at Aris. The world he inhabited was a twisted version of reality. The Great War had ended in a stalemate, leading to a fragmented Europe controlled by various factions. This had transformed London into Neo-London, a city of gleaming brass skyscrapers and shadowy alleyways, a place where innovation and corruption walked hand in hand. "Damn this infernal loop!" Aris roared, throwing a wrench at a half-disassembled temporal calibrator. The wrench bounced harmlessly off a reinforced Ethereum conduit. He was losing his mind, piece by piece, to the relentless repetition. Each cycle eroded his hope, gnawing at his sanity. The first day of the loop was always the same. He woke in his cramped apartment above a clockwork repair shop, the smell of oil and ozone thick in the air. The professor, a jovial man with a twinkle in his eye and a passion for pushing the boundaries of science, would share his latest breakthrough, a potential method for stabilizing temporal fractures. That was before the, quote, accident. Before Eldridge was found dead in his lab, an Ethereum shard embedded in his chest, and Aris, holding the murder weapon, discovered moments later by the constabulary. The second day was the trial A sham, a predetermined outcome orchestrated by someone with considerable power. He was always found guilty. He always proclaimed his innocence, his voice lost in the din of the courtroom. The third day was his escape. He would break free from the prison transport, aided by a mysterious contact who went only by the name of, quote, Quadawote, quote, Quadawote. Quadawote, a shadowy figure with an uncanny knowledge of the loop, provided Aris with vital information and resources, but always remained elusive, their motives unclear. This time, however, Aris was determined to change things. He couldn't bear to relive the nightmare again. He started with the beginning, August 12, 1948. Waking in his apartment, he ignored the familiar routine. He didn't rush to the university. Instead, he meticulously examined his apartment, searching for any clue he might have missed. He found a hidden compartment behind a loose brick in the fireplace, containing a coded message. It was a series of numbers and symbols, which after hours of decoding, revealed a meeting place. The Crooked Cog, a notorious gambling den and information broker in the heart of Neo-London. Ethereum lamps cast a lurid glow on the faces of gamblers, smugglers, and spies. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of cheap gin. Aris, dressed in a disguise he had cobbled together from scraps, cautiously entered the establishment. He found the contact, a wiry woman with steely gray eyes and a cybernetic arm, sitting in a dimly lit corner. Her name was Serafina, and she claimed to have information about Professor Eldridge's murder. "They wanted him dead," Serafina said, her voice raspy. Quote, "Project Nightingale?" Aris asked, his heart pounding. "What is it?" "Something they don't want anyone to know about," Serafina replied cryptically. "Something that could change everything." She revealed that Eldridge had stumbled upon a secret government project, an attempt to weaponize the temporal anomalies that plagued Neo-London. The project was headed by a powerful figure within the Ministry of Chronological Affairs, a man named Minister Thornton, a ruthless and ambitious politician with a reputation for eliminating anyone who stood in his way. It was a prototype, a highly unstable and experimental device developed within the Nightingale Project. The frame job was meticulously planned, and Aris was the perfect scapegoat. Armed with this new information, Aris shifted his focus. He still aimed to prevent the murder, but now he had a target: Minister Thornton. The next day, August 13th, he bypassed his usual meeting with Eldridge and instead infiltrated the Ministry of Chronological Affairs. The ministry was a labyrinthine complex of offices and laboratories, powered by a massive Ethereum reactor. He reached Thornton's office, a grand room overlooking Neo-London. Thornton was there, pacing back and forth, talking on a secure comm link. "The project is nearing completion," Thornton said, his voice cold and calculating. "We will control time itself. No one will be able to stop us." Aris confronted Thornton, accusing him of murdering Eldridge and framing him for the crime. Thornton, initially dismissive, quickly realized that Aris knew too much. "You should have stayed out of this, Thorne," Thornton said, his eyes narrowing. A fight ensued. Thornton, despite his age, was a formidable opponent, trained in combat. Aris, relying on his wits and agility, managed to disarm Thornton, but not before the minister activated a temporal disruptor hidden in his desk. The room shimmered, and a wave of temporal energy washed over Aris. He felt a searing pain in his head, and then everything went black. He awoke in his apartment, the chronometer on his wrist reading 3:17 a.m. August 14, 1948. The loop had reset again, but this time something was different. He remembered the details of Project Nightingale, the names of the scientists involved. He remembered everything, even though the loop had theoretically wiped his memory. The temporal disruptor, it seemed, had not only reset the loop, but it also altered it, allowing him to retain his memories. This was a game changer. He now had an advantage. He knew what was going to happen. He could anticipate Thornton's moves. He could finally break free. He spent the next few loops gathering evidence, meticulously documenting Thornton's crimes, and recruiting allies. She introduced him to other members of the resistance, a group of scientists, engineers, and former government agents who opposed Thornton's ambition. Together, they devised a plan to expose Thornton and sabotage Project Nightingale. They would use the temporal loop to their advantage, anticipating Thornton's actions and countering his moves at every turn. The key was the Ethereum reactor powering Project Nightingale. If they could overload the reactor, they could disrupt the temporal field and potentially break the loop. On August 13th, Aris and his allies launched their attack. They infiltrated the ministry, bypassed security checkpoints, and fought their way to the reactor chamber. The battle was fierce, but they were prepared. They knew the layout of the building, the positions of the guards, Thornton's tactics. Aris confronted Thornton in the reactor chamber. The minister, surrounded by his guards, was furious. "You cannot stop me, Thorne," Thornton shouted. "I will control time itself." "You're wrong, Thornton," Aris replied, his voice steady. "You're just a prisoner of it." A final showdown ensued. Aris, with the help of Seraphina and the other members of the resistance, fought Thornton and his guards. The reactor chamber was filled with the roar of weapons and the crackle of Ethereum energy. Aris managed to reach the reactor control panel. He input the overload sequence, triggering a chain reaction that would destabilize the temporal field. "No!" Thornton screamed, lunging at Aris. But it was too late. The reactor began to glow with an intense light. The temporal field around Neo-London began to fluctuate wildly. The loop was breaking. Aris could feel it. The familiar sense of dread and resignation was replaced by a surge of hope. He was finally escaping the temporal prison. As the reactor reached critical mass, a blinding flash of light engulfed the ministry. Everything went silent. Then, slowly, the light faded. Aris found himself lying on the floor of the reactor chamber, surrounded by debris. Thornton was gone. The guards were gone. The reactor was silent, inert. It was still ticking, but the date had changed. It was August 15th, 1948. The loop was broken, but the world was different. The temporal field had been disrupted, causing ripple effects throughout history. Neo-London was no longer powered by Ethereum. The technology had vanished, replaced by more conventional sources of energy. The fragmented Europe had begun to heal, slowly but surely moving towards unity. Aris Thorne was no longer a fugitive. He was a hero. He had saved the world from Thornton's ambition and broken the temporal loop. Evidence of Thornton's crimes had been found, exonerating Aris from the murder of Professor Eldridge. He looked out at the transformed Neo-London, a city reborn. The drizzle had stopped. The sun was shining. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Aris felt a sense of peace. He had escaped the loop, but the experience had changed him. He was no longer the naive scientist he once was. He was a survivor, a warrior, a guardian of time. He knew that the temporal anomalies were still out there, lurking in the shadows.